Yo, what is up guys? It's Pedro here. So in today's video, I want to be a little positive. I want to talk about a big advantage the Washington Commanders have going into this week 3 game against the Las Vegas Raiders. If you guys are new, do all that good stuff, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. We're, closing in on 16,000 subscribers. So let's get right into it. There's a lot of injury updates I want to talk about, so I'm going to do that at the end of the video. Some guys that got on IR, or at least one that went on IR today, some roster moves they made, officially signing Preston Smith and, Marcus Mariota speaking. So even if Jaden Daniels doesn't play, I do think the Commanders have a good advantage going into this game. They are playing on 10 days of rest. The Commanders played last Thursday. So, they get a little bit of rest, but then also the Raiders played on Monday. Not only Monday night at 10 p.m. I mean, I guess it was 7 p.m. their time because they were playing at Las Vegas, but still the game ends late and 5-hour flight. It wasn't, it's not easy. And they got to fly over to DC. So on a short week, they got to fly over from Las Vegas to DC. West to east is a little bit easier, but still it's a 5-hour flight. And, you got the time zone change. I mean, that's all little stuff, but it all stacks up, especially us having the extra few days of rest and them being on, they play on Monday night. So, they have way less rest. I mean, they have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 5 full days off. And even then, Tuesday or one of the days they're going to be traveling. The Commanders don't have to travel. So I do think that is a big advantage for the Washington Commanders. They're really banged up. So that extra time, hopefully gives some of these guys that maybe if it was on if it was a week, if they played on Sunday last week, then they wouldn't be able to play this week. But now they might be able to play. So guys like Brandon Coleman, Trey Amos, they got hurt in the game. They came back. But, those guys, should be good. John Bates, Dan Quinn said John Bates and John Bates and Noah Brown are long shots to play in the game. That's what Dan Quinn said. So, if they played on Sunday, definitely had no chance to play. But now that it's a few extra days, maybe Bates gets to play. Still kind of doubting it for both of those guys. But the good news is they haven't put either of them on IR yet. That is really good news. So, that's good. For me, Noah Brown, I really don't care. He's when he plays, he's usually decent. Last week against the Packers, he wasn't good. But the thing is, the dude just gets injured. I mean, already this year, we were 2 weeks in and three, not separate injuries, but 3 separate times where he's gotten injured. You had the early off-season injury, and then he re-injured it later in that summer, and then now the groin injury. I mean, it's ridiculous at this point, and it's nothing on him. Like, he can't really, it's not like he wants to get hurt, but it is the reality situation. You can't really rely on a guy like Noah Brown to ball out for you and play every week. So you got Debo, who, if we didn't have Debo, man, this receiving core, it would be ugly. Terry needs to step up. You have Terry, you got Debo, and then one of the other guys got to step up. Luke stepped up a little bit last week. You got Jalen Lane, need him to step up. And then you got Chris Moore and, some other options as well on the practice squad. But back to this point before we fully get into the injury update. I do think it's good news, and it does matter. You're playing at home. They have to, it's one of the longest, travel distances that, teams have to make anytime they go from the west to the east, and it's all the way on the East Coast. It's not like you're going to Ohio or something where it's close to the East Coast, but it's not. No, DC, or I guess, Landover, all the way there on the east, and then it's a longer flight and the Commanders have extra rest. It does suck that the injuries, a lot of them were major, so it's not like the few days is going to make a big difference for those guys because they're out. Jonathan Jones out, Austin Eckler obviously out, Dietrich Wise obviously out. So those do suck, but some of the guys that are a little bit more banged up, they'll be fresh for this game and good to go, which is good. And the Raiders, on the other hand, I don't know their injury situation, but they're definitely banged up. I mean, Brock Bowers, he'll play, but he just played on Monday, and he was questionable going into that game, and he didn't look 100%. So how is he going to look this week? The injury report will come out today for the Commanders and the Raiders. Will he? I mean, he's not going to. I would be surprised if he was a full participant. So not getting as much rest. Who knows? Maybe he doesn't play. I said earlier he's probably going to play, but who knows how that knee's reacting to him playing a full game. So real quick, a word from today's sponsor. And a huge shout out to Sleeper for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you guys go ahead and check them out. They got fantasy sports leagues, a bunch of breaking news on there, and also you can win real money with picks, which I have done each week. So make sure you guys follow my picks. You guys can tail the picks as well. Use my code Pedro on Sleeper and get a 100% match up to $100. You put in 10, you'll get 20. And yeah, link in the description. Terms and conditions apply. All right, so let's get into some injury updates. Also, the Commanders signed Preston Smith. That's cool. Made a video about that yesterday. If you guys want to go ahead and check it out, and not gonna make an update video just because everything I said in that is still true, and they just signed him. That's the difference. And I said he likely would get signed. Obviously if he's working out, there's some mutual interest there. So these are the guys from the 2018 Washington Redskins that are still a part of the franchise. So player wise, you got Tress Way, Jeremy Reeves, Daron Payne. For some reason, my video yesterday, I was like, oh, Daron Payne is not on the team. I don't know why I said that. And then you see some of the other guys, and you got Kerrigan there as a coach. He's going to be wearing 52, so that's cool. Some guys that got their, rest days today, Von Miller, Zach Ertz, Laremy Tunsil, and Marcus Mariota spoke today to the media, which is usually the starting quarterback who does. So a lot of people are like, all right, Jaden's not playing. But here's the thing, though. Last year, before the Chicago Bears game, Marcus Mariota also spoke, and Jaden ended up playing. So Dan Quinn said that Jaden's not going to practice until Friday at the earliest. And he also does want to see him practice before he feels comfortable putting him out there on Sunday. So Friday's the day. If he practices on Friday, then he's probably going to play. If he doesn't, he won't. Let's talk about some other news. Jonathan Jones, cornerback from the Patriots, on IR with a hamstring injury. This is getting bad, guys, in terms of the injuries. Last year we had one kind of major injury, and that was Jonathan Allen. We had Austin Eckler was in and out of the lineup. We had Noah Brown also out at the end of the season. But it's getting ridiculous at this point, and all the players that are getting hurt, there's a common theme. They're a little bit older. Dietrich Wise is older. Jonathan Jones is older. Austin Eckler is older. I believe they're all 30 plus. Dietrich Wise, I'm not completely sure. But there's a common theme. Guys that are older getting injured. And it's not just random, in terms of, younger guys versus older guys, whether they have injuries or not. Overall, sure, it might be random, but there's a higher chance of injury if you are older, and also a longer recovery time. So, I know a lot of people criticize Adam Peters for this offseason, and so far those criticisms seem legitimate because, it's been an issue so far, and, they have to go out and sign these guys, and, it's too little too late in my opinion. Preston Smith's cool. He'll be hopefully a solid rotational edge rusher for them, but man, I mean, it would have been nice. You had an opportunity to get Zadarius Smith this offseason, a guy that's balling out I guess he played one game, but he had a half sack or a sack for the Eagles, and it's like, not only do you not get him, but you let your division rival get him who doesn't really need him, and you definitely need him. So for me, that's just, something that they should have done in the offseason, been a little bit more aggressive with some of these positions, and, maybe gone younger, and I hope Adam Peters this offseason learns from that a little bit. Let's go a little bit younger at some of these positions, or at least a little bit of a mix, in terms of, your significant players. Because, yeah, they might have some youth like, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who I like, but, before the season started, he wasn't a starter. He wasn't, even the second string guy. Now he's kind of been launched into that role, but you want to have, your starters and your good players overall be young, with a mix of some veterans in there as well. And right now, that's not the case. If you look at the starting offense, Terry, Laramie Tunsil not young, Coleman's younger, Biotis just, middle, kind of average. Same thing with Allegretti. Connolly's young, Ertz is old, Noah Brown's, average, Debo's a little bit older, Jaden's young. It's a mix of both, but I mean, they're the oldest team in the NFL. They're the oldest team in the NFL, I believe, by a decent margin. So it is unfortunate, that it's, leading to stuff like this with, injury stuff, but they're going to have to step up. Some of these younger guys like Ben Sinnott, I need to see something from him this week. A second round pick, and I said it last year, and some people said it was too early to say it, and it is, but it's looking like a pretty disappointing pick. We got a while though, I'll give it the full season, but I mean, he really hasn't shown much. And I was reading some of the tweets from the beat reporters, and it seems like they don't really trust him to be, to get a decent amount of tight end snaps for, a replacement for Bates. So that might have to be Colson Yankoff, who's an undrafted free agent from the same year. Like, the fact that that's the situation they're in, that the undrafted free agent is going to be replacing the guy ahead of Sinnott is crazy in my opinion. But it is what it is. Peters had some hits, he had some maybe misses, and we still got to see some of these guys. Jaden obviously looks like a good pick, but the rest of them, the jury's still out. Like, we have to keep the same energy. If I'm saying we got to wait and see with a guy like Johnny Newton, we still have to wait and see with Mikey Sanderstill. I think Mikey Sanderstill's a stud. He had a really good first year, but we got to see it again this year, because it's been a little bit up and down for him. But overall, obviously, really like that pick. I think he's a stud, but we got to see that for a little bit longer. With Jaden, you kind of know just the energy he gives, and how elite of a player he was last year. But a little bit of a tangent there, but did just want to talk about that younger versus older kind of dilemma that the Commanders have. You see some of the quotes Dan Quinn had about Preston Smith. They kind of wanted him for a while now, so they finally go ahead and sign him. So that's it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe if you guys are new, and peace.